Welcome back to Northwest Elite Spirit. I'm Coach Brian, and this is part 2 of Developing Patience and Willpower from a Separate Reality by Carlos Castaneda. And in this section, Don Juan is teaching Carlos about patience and willpower. And Don Juan starts off by saying that in fact, a warrior has only his patience and his willpower, and with them he builds anything that he wants. And when I think about what it really comes down to in getting things done, it's willpower and patience. And it could be smarts, but if a smart man has no willpower and no patience, he will fail. Whereas a dumb man who has willpower and patience will succeed and maybe prove out in the end that he wasn't so dumb after all. So Carlos says, "But I am not a warrior." And Don Juan answers him that you've already began on the path of sorcery, and you have no more time for retreats or for regrets. And sorcery sounds kind of hippy-dippy or woo-woo, but it's just really like about having a path to personal power and seeing your will be done. And he says you have no more time for retreats or regrets. So when we begin on this path of knowledge and personal power, we may run up against some obstacles within ourselves and with other people. And we could retreat and maybe go back to the old ways that we're trying to break free from. But that'll be very hard. Once you start seeing more clearly, it's hard to go back the other way. And so you have no time for it. And you have no time for regrets in that, you made mistakes when you didn't know so much. And you'll make mistakes again in the future. So have no regrets for the mistakes that you made, and understand that you will make mistakes in the future, and so regrets aren't useful. And so then Carlos says to him, and understand that this isn't the whole conversation, I'm telling you what they said to each other and then what I think about it. Then Carlos says something to him well, what is willpower? And Don Juan says to him that it's hard to explain, and it's even hard to point out other than the results, which are extraordinary. So it's hard to know where it comes from, but it's hard to prove where it comes from, but it's not hard to prove the results. The results of willpower prove out in astonishing ways. And so then Carlos asks him where is the willpower? Where is it? And Don Juan says it's in the place of your luminous fibers. And if you want to use your imagination for where this might be, look at a chakra chart, and the solar plexus chakra is the space where the will is supposed to emanate from, according to Don Juan. And then Carlos says, so is it wanting something? Don Juan has a grandson who wants a motorcycle. And he's no, it's not wanting a thing and getting something like a motorcycle. And that his grandson only indulges, and he's not actually practicing his will. And so then Carlos asks him, this might be a little mixed up here. I don't have the audio in my ear right now. But Carlos asks him, is it no, Lucio only indulges. And so Carlos asks him, if he could practice willpower or how to practice willpower, and could he do it by denying himself things? And Don Juan says, no, denying yourself things is an indulgence, and it's not a practice of will. In that he doesn't recommend denying yourself indulgence because you might warp your will like this. And I see this a lot with people who are like, who lost weight or want like ex-drug addicts or people have been in bad relationships. They deny themselves things, and they're actually quite miserable, and they're more focused on denying themselves things than they are on seeing their will be done. And sometimes they start taking pride in their ability to deny themselves things, and even more pride than they take in, seeing their will come to fruition. And Don Juan says that basically they're really only just hiding in themselves when they practice denying themselves indulgence. And then Carlos asks him if it's like I can't remember exactly, but Don Juan says to him that like it's a thing that comes out of a sorcerer or a warrior when it's his will, when he has something he wants, these fibers come out, or his will comes out and reaches out and connects him to those things, basically. And Carlos says, is it an object? And Don Juan says, no, it's not an object. It's not a wish. It's not like a hope or anything like that. It's just a thing that is. It's a power within you that exists, that seeks to be expressed, basically. And it will express itself despite your denying yourself indulgences. So you may have an empty feeling inside because you're denying yourself, you're being prideful about it, but you still have like an empty space inside. And you still don't see your will come to life. Don Juan goes to explain that it's like a power within you that, say you were in a battle and you, by all means, it looks like you're defeated. There's no way out. But through your will, you pull it out and you win that battle. It's a power that allows people, very few people, to achieve extraordinary feats. And so Carlos is like, well, is it courage? And he says, no, it's not courage. Like he's basically saying courageous men are cool, they're noble, they're stand-up people, but they are more apt to perform common sense acts. They're not necessarily performing astonishing feats, and those are different things. But there are, he says, very few courageous men are actually also have will. And again, that's not like a knock on them, because it's like a rare breed, these people who are able to express will and see their will be done. And in the end of, if you watch part 1, Don Juan says that the will is something that sends a sorcerer through a wall, through space, through the moon, or to the moon if he wants. And, again, that sounds hippy-dippy, but if you think about it, there's, people have gone to the moon. There's been scientists and engineers and astronauts who have seen their will be done and gone to the moon. There is a practical side to this if you're willing to look at it. And a lot of this, too, is like Don Juan is asking Carlos to just look at things a different way, and not be so fixed in his ways, and just try a different point of view. Close one eye, open the other type deal. Cross your eyes type deal. Look at things in another way. And so I've been practicing this. One way I've literally been looking at things a different way is I do one eye and see as much as I can see. Close the other eye, see as much as I see. Cross my eyes, close, things like that. And then, we have a 7-year-old that comes around, and so he's short and low, and he figures out things that I'm having a hard time figuring out. And if I get down to his point of view, I can see things differently, and I figure out more things that way. And then I know. So again, a warrior has to know that he is waiting for his will. He has to know that that it will come to him. And that's kind of like, if I just look at things differently, maybe I'll see what I'm looking for. And also with the 7-year-old is like practicing patience. I don't know if I went over it. I think I did. But when Carlos asks Don Juan if he could practice by denying himself things, Don Juan answers like asking questions jokingly, and he goes on to tell him he would never tell him to stop asking questions because that would warp his will. Again, he would be worried about not doing. He'd be more worried about not doing than he would be about doing. So that would warp his will, and so he lets him ask all the questions he wants. And I'm practicing that with 7-year-old. He asks a lot of questions, and sometimes it can be annoying, but I see how this could play out. You know how you could warp a kid's will by telling them by denying them that indulgence to ask a lot of questions. And in other ways too, I'm practicing it like we may have to move out of here very soon, and I don't really know where we're going to go or what we're going to do, but I do know that I will see my will be done. And this place here is actually proof positive for me personally that my will be done. And I'll fill you in a little bit. So before we moved here, I was sleeping in my car for about 8 months. And while I was sleeping in my car, I was only taking work in places that I found interesting, like out in the woods or interesting neighborhoods. And at the same time, at night, I would go home and I would envision like my future property. And on my future property, there would be mountain view, which we have. We can't see it right now, but out that way is Mount Rainier, a beautiful, clear view. I imagined, a giant fireplace out in the yard. Have that. Imagine apple trees and cherry trees and walnut trees. Have that. Imagined pine trees and trees like this. I don't know if we're going to be able to see them. No. But behind me here are pine trees. So I imagine like a forest of trees, harvestable trees, for, home repairs and things you needed to build. I imagined lots of rocks. And that's, how I built this big old fire pit was with all these rocks we have around here. We have like a bunch of like bowling ball size, fist size, like smaller ones that we use for building things like this fire pit here. I imagine trails, and like long forest trails. And if you look out that way, there's miles and miles of forest trail out there. And I imagined 1/4 prairie and 3/4 forest, and I think we're lower than 1/4 prairie out here, but we are on a prairie and a lot of forest that I get to trail run on. I imagine mushrooms growing, wild mushrooms, edible mushrooms growing, and we have those even in our garden. They pop up. And imagine multiple buildings on the property for friends and family, and there's a bunch of buildings on the property. And that's where the patience comes in. So I manifested this place. Like sliding doors, like Japanese style doors. I imagine those. They're not Japanese style, but our whole front wall pretty much in our kitchen and our living room and in my daughter's room is all big sliding glass doors with mountain view. And then we have like smaller sliding doors on the inside. And I imagine that. But like I imagined Japanese style sliding doors, and I got those. And I got, a property that, I imagined property for my family. and for my friends. So I don't quite have that. There's other people living here on these properties, and they're not quite Japanese sliding doors, and that's where the patience is going to come in. And that is where the willpower is going to come in, because, like I said, I can see it. I'm almost there, and my will be done. And for you personally, I suggest that, start small. Like, start doing the little things that, you see yourself doing. Of course, like, don't eat junk food, but don't make a thing out of it. Just don't eat junk food and leave it at that. Or whatever it is, like being on your phone or watching TV. Just don't do it and don't make a thing of it. Because you're going to begin to warp your will and just focus on the things that you are doing and will do. So Don Juan is explaining to Carlos that Carlos's problem is that he knows he is waiting, but he doesn't know what he is waiting for. And that a warrior knows he is waiting, and he knows what he's waiting for. So there's some great advice right there, to know that you're waiting and to know what you're waiting for. So my thoughts on that would be to give myself a vision for what I want for myself. And I would say for you too, have a vision for what you want for yourself, and know that you have to be patient. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to comment below your thoughts on this advice. And what I would suggest also is to go and listen to the books